Welcome to the New Leaf podcast for turning over a new leaf in financial advice. Today I am joined by the Megastar, Mark Taylor. And Mark is talking to us all about bounce back, about coming back from absolute terrible results.
I've been to the highest highs and the lowest lows in my life. What happened was the 2008 mega crash. Literally everything went, and I did fall out with most of my family because I was at a family barbecue when I'd virtually lost everything. And I said, for years, I've bought you your houses, I've paid for everything, paid for your weddings, done this, done that, the other. And now when I need a bit of support and I've got absolutely nothing.
And talks about three key things which I think we can learn from him today. What would you say the three most important things are?
One of the most important things for me is...
Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm very well, how are you?
I'm really well. It's good to see you today, and we're talking about your life and our friendship.
Okay.
And I think I'd like to start by saying a massive thank you to you, because on my birthday, you bought me this absolutely stunning watch, as you know, and it is the Omega Constellation that you purchased for me. I'd just like to say thanks. No one has ever bought me anything so beautiful in my life, so thank you for that.
Very kind, very old watch, just like yourself.
Thank you. So Mark, I know you really well. You're one of my best mates. And you've done a lot in your life. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your life and how you got to this point? Maybe starting right from the beginning, because I remember you saying to me, you're an insurance salesman right from day one, really.
Yes, more or less. Well, my first job, believe it or not, was a greenkeeper of the golf club, because I love my golf. And during that period, my father was a director of a local co-op business and ex-Royal Marine, fought in the war, all this type of stuff. And they had the co-op insurance agent, so the CIS, and he was very immaculately dressed, very dapper, and he had a new car every
Unlike
year.
yourself.
Unlike myself, of course, and full head of hair. But so that was one thing I always said to my father. I was always destined to go into the Royal Marines because I'm very musical, or was back then. And about 6 weeks before joining, my father said, I don't think the Royal Marines are for you, son. I said, why is that, Dad? And this was the first time I heard this phrase. He said, because when you're a Royal Marine and they say jump, you say, how high, sir? And he said, you don't like being told what to do. So I thought, well, that's a fair comment. Anyway, I then went...
Can I just ask you about that? Do you think that's been something that's run through your life where you need to be sort of superbly independent?
I just never have liked kind of being told what to do in terms of I do things that sometimes are principled that people would say, well, you shouldn't be doing that, such as my first wife became ill about a year after we'd divorced or separated and divorced. And I still kept looking after her. And I looked after her right until she more or less died. And I've been with, my beautiful wife, Vanessa, now for coming up 20 years. At first, she was slightly resentful of that. But then she said, well, to be honest, that shows what sort of person that you are, that even though, you've said it wasn't a difficult or acrimonious divorce. We literally had nothing when we first met, when we were 18, and we just split everything 50-50. There wasn't even any solicitors. We'd just grown apart 20-odd years together. And we were separated, none of us left each other for the other. And it's just about that sort of principle. So I like to do things that are logical and things that are right from wrong, realistic. If you've done something wrong or politeness or manners. And that's just the kind of way I was. So when my father said that, he obviously knew me from a baby, and he knew it wasn't really for me because I'm not a great one at taking orders, especially when some of them are a little bit silly or nonsense, in my opinion. So that kind of shaped me and molded me. I then went on from that first job into I worked for Canon Photocopiers, and I was really successful there by a bit of a stroke of luck. So basically, in those days, we had faxes. So we're talking about 1983, that kind of period. And a fax came through, believe it or not, very curious that you've just come back on this, from Cunard at Southampton. So I'm from Portsmouth originally, saying they'd like some photocopiers for the QE2 in the head office. So I made an appointment, went to the appointment, and literally I was the only one who turned up because everybody else who worked for, say, Minolta or Rank Xerox or these types of people thought it was a wind-up.
Okay.
And I sold 7 photocopiers that were 7,000 quid each then.
Well done.
And obviously got a huge bonus and went from there. So, of course, I had a year's worth of selling experience. And then I got the opportunity to apply for, basically, I met somebody who ran the Golf Insurance in Portsmouth. And I said, I've always wanted to be an insurance agent. And he said, you have to be 21. But I looked so old then that I looked about 31.
You still look old.
I know, but...
you look much older than me.
I know, but unfortunately we can't all be good-looking, handsome chaps like yourself, can we?
Even though you are younger than me, which is
I am technically younger than you, or
miracle.
actually younger than you. But it is a miracle. But of course, you've got the looks, I've got the brains. But anyway, we'll stop at that.
Fair play.
So
I'll go with that one.
So they said, you're supposed to be 21, but because you look so old, you can do it when you're 19. So I was fortunate enough that when I was 19, unfortunately back in 1984, same as you, you buy a book. So the CIS, you have a book which has a round-in, you go around and visit people. And in those days, literally, in the old streets of Portsmouth, sort of quite a rough area, you'd go around and they'd leave their key on a string, you'd put your hand through the door, let yourself in, they'd leave bars of chocolate for you. There was all this neighbourhood type of situations, funny, really funny old people. A lot of them were people in the Navy and fought in the war, this kind of stuff. And really kind of enjoyed it, but it gave me a big springboard because in those days, my salary at 19 years old was 19,000 quid. And
Massive
to put that in perspective, my first house cost 24,000.
Yeah.
So it was one of those situations that it kind of started off well, and then I kind of went from there. I had a sort of a mentor who was a golf professional, was a big property man.
Okay.
So he taught me how to play golf, but he then taught me the ways of buying property, doing buy-to-let, this type of thing.
Because you absolutely love property and
I love property.
Development of property, don't you?
Property, development of property, and in collaboration really with financial services. So my whole life has been about property finance, and then now utilising SIPs and other type of instruments which give you tax relief advantages, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So
because you are the only non-selling principal in new leaf distribution right now, which puts you in a really unique position within the organisation, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I'm old, I sort of was first an IFA literally in 1984, so over 40 years. They didn't even have the Financial Services Act then. We were part of something called FINBRA, sort of a self-regulated type scenario.
Yeah.
And it was a different era. So in those days, the phrase of "it's not what you know, it's who you know" was never more prevalent.
Okay.
So, for example, all the building society managers, bank managers, I used to specialise in difficult cases or getting things through on the finance and mortgage side. So I would literally get called from my pal at Halifax saying, unfortunately, somebody's declared this CCJ, we can't help them, can you do it? I said, oh yeah, I'll take them to my mate in Barclays at the time who didn't have a cheque or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd be interviewing people in Barclays offices to do a Halifax mortgage and vice versa, all this kind of thing. Then it was all done on your word.
Yeah.
So your word is your bond, that old-fashioned phrase.
Yeah.
So I would, for example, say, I've got a great mate, Hobbs, a really good mate of mine. He wants a 100% mortgage. And the lender, be it the Halifax, Nationwide, whoever, would have their own mandate. So they'd could write their own mortgages out up to £500,000 in those days, which was a lot of money. And they would say to me, Mark, do you know this Mark Hobbs? I said, yeah. I said, dodgy character, but good at paying. And they said, do you vouch for him? I said, yeah, I vouch for him, in this obviously example. And they say, well, that's your word. We give them the mortgage. There was no underwriting. It was all done
very different,
on your reputation.
Very different in those days.
Which, of course, is you don't even see a manager now and stuff. So it's more, driven from timescales, process, et cetera, et cetera. We then got into, because of the connections I'd made, I've never been one for competing or running down competitors, this type of thing. I used to work with many, many, many introducers who were also advisors or would do a different type of business or full IFA work, because I would focus more on, the property side. So I'd built up, I owned more than 50 houses before I was 27.
Wow.
And in those days, the massive
50
growth,
houses?
More than 50, yeah. So the growth was huge, because in the early 80s, houses were literally going up 50, 60% every year, every 2 years. And then you'd use your portfolio. We'd move, my first wife and I, sort of 6 times in 7 years, because you'd have double sets of tax relief in those days, Myris it was called.
Yep.
And then the bank managers would have a load of assets. So you would have bought all these houses, so you might have had 150,000 quid's worth of properties, because they were cheap in those days. But then all of a sudden they're worth 350.
Yeah.
So you'd have equity, you'd do leverage. I'd buy huge like nursing homes and convert them into
Amazing.
25 rooms. And I'd be an approved landlord for people who were the homeless people.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
what do you think it is about you, your personality, your past, your drive that makes you want to accumulate so much so early in your life?
I think it's because the whole point of people sometimes misunderstand money, having money and wealth, because we'll obviously come on to a minute by I've been to the highest highs and the lowest lows in my life.
And I know all about that. I'd love to get into that.
Yeah. But I think what it does, this is where people make a mistake. Money means independence and not being told what to do.
And that comes right back to the beginning.
Yeah, it does.
So the drive for money for you is about independence.
Yeah.
And control.
Yes. Yeah. And also helping people out. So
where do you think that's come from? That vibe, where does that come from?
Well, I was adopted as a child.
Okay.
So I was kind of my mum and dad who I couldn't have chosen a better set of parents, and but they couldn't have children. So I was adopted, but I was only literally 2 weeks old. They took me back after I was about, believe it or not, 6 or 7 weeks premature. So very, very small as a baby, about 3.5 pounds in an incubator for a while. And I feel in some ways I was kind of cherished a bit more because it was something they couldn't have. Whereas sometimes people have children who maybe not necessarily wanted them. You know what I mean by that.
It's,
And we've often spoken about this situation of blood versus how you're treated and loved and this kind of thing. And so I think it was potentially the thought that I could have, and I'd always known ever since I was born. So, early days, I knew I was adopted. I sort of almost felt quite special because I suppose in those days, I thought my parents would pick me out amongst a row of babies. That one's the one. Obviously, that's not the case. But
I wouldn't have picked you just.
No, I know that.
So
obviously, the problem was. But to be fair, I was quite good looking as a baby. Similar haircut and quite good looking. But it was. I think it was maybe to do with that. I don't know really, but it was. And my parents came from a poor background, from Portsmouth. My mum. My mum had 3 jobs. We used to go out. I remember in our pajamas. She'd work at a children's home in the evenings. Night shift, so we'd drive up to this little children's home at 11 o'clock at night, in our pajamas. My dad would have 2 other jobs. My mum would work as a cleaner in the morning, then she'd be a dinner lady at our school, so we'd sort of walk in or cycle in together. And everything was a bit more, I think slightly more difficult in some ways then, in terms of, you walk to school. Our school was 3.5 miles away. You walk to school, or eventually when they could afford a push bike, they think they bought on some sort of terms. You ride your bike. It's not quite that way now, but I think in some respects, I don't know if it was easier to make money then. It was easier to make money with property then.
But this instilled this great drive in you and this graft. You're a
graft. Also to look after people, because my parents had a council house and they managed to buy their council house. And when I was 21, I paid their mortgage off, which meant that my mother could retire, because my father was made redundant at 62 and my mum was still working 3 jobs. And by paying their mortgage off, because they were old when they had the mortgage, it was expensive per month. Because I was in a position to literally pay their mortgage off, it meant my mum could retire as well, which is great because unfortunately my dad passed away 7 years later. So, and he literally was here one day, dropped down dead the next day. So didn't suffer and all that kind of thing. But then I went on during that period of actually, a bit like yourself, employing my family, other people, trying to help people out, friends, and buying my family houses. Amazing. So I'd house people, do this, pay them a monthly allowance. And for me, I'd say it's more, not so much, the money is great, because obviously the money enables you to do things. That's what it's about.
And at the moment, you're a very wealthy man. But let's go to your peak of wealth. Talk to me about how you got to that. Well, tell me about the peak of your wealth, first of all, where you got to the highest echelon.
Well, the peak of my wealth, I guess, was probably 2000, 2001. So I was lucky enough to actually retire then. So I was 35 years old, went to live in the Algarve, bought a beautiful villa there, had 7 consultants on the financial services side. There was a company called Scottish Life, which obviously are Royal London now, taken over. And they started up a little AR offering. So they only literally had 7 ARs in the country. It was a new experiment. So we were one of those 7. Then I got kind of poached by Scottish Amicable as an AR, and they had about 240 ARs, and we were always in the top 3 to 5. So in those days, 2000, I was earning about 280,000 from financial services, and obviously a lot more than that from my properties.
And you had, at the peak, how many properties at this time?
Well, yeah, a lot more than 50. But anyway, forget that for the time being.
And the financial services world had given you this lift, had built you up to this.
Well, it was through, realistically,
the foundation.
If I never played golf, I wouldn't be in this position. Right. So it was from golf, meeting people who are business and finance type orientated. Then this sort of mentor took me down that route because, coming from a council house and my father worked his guts out, all this kind of thing, but wouldn't take any sort of risks. It was the property and the growth of the property and all this kind of stuff. But the problem was, and this is what can happen if you're not careful with money, is that money actually then suddenly almost becomes meaningless. And this is where, by not consolidating, and we'll come on to this at the very last question you're going to ask me, but it's very easy to be honest, become a bit of an arse, which I feel I did at some stage. We got to the stage of retiring, living out in Portugal and playing golf 4 or 5 times a week. Then all of a sudden you think, well, you're either this way inclined that you have drive or goals or a mind that needs to be working or looking at angles or ideas. And I saw an opportunity at the eastern side of the Algarve and the western side of Spain that joins Portugal. They didn't have any British estate agents and the prices were so low just over the border. So I'd already set up a scheme because we had lots of property in Florida, great big villas and things. And I'd set up a scheme with Washington Mutual Bank at the time with the people who I'd bought my villas from, called Superior Real Estate. And they bought their own golf course, Highlands Reserve. And I set up a deal whereby we would do a remortgage on a person in the UK, and then I'd finance a balance of an 80% mortgage through Washington Mutual, all self-certified in those days. So the selling feature would be, would you like a 5-bedroom villa in Florida, take the kids, etc., fully furnished, that will cost you 200 quid more a month? Because you'd normally refinance the house, raise the 20% deposit and go from there. So anyway, I was with them in a property show at Ascot, I think it was. And this chap approached us and said, we've got this new island just off the Algarve called Isla Canella. And we've bought this island and we're getting planning and we're looking for an agent to bring in the UK market. Superior Real Estate were a big company. So I said, I'm looking to, I'm over in the Algarve already. I might as well act as the agent. Anyway, so I went over there, saw this niche. And within 18 months of me moving and retiring, I had 43 staff and 7 offices across the eastern Algarve and into Spain. We were selling between 60 and 80 properties per month and building the properties. We leased the whole Ibis hotel and we do inspection visits and this, that and the other. So
your lifestyle at this time was really, really high.
Well, it was massively high, but then all of a sudden, as with all success, where you've got to be careful of, and things that I've learned from you over the years, is almost the problem of not saying no and realising when not all profit is good profit. So okay. I would literally have a central hub of business, which would be the property business, but we owned our own solicitors firm, we owned our own cleaning company, we owned our own transportation company, we owned our own sort of boutique,
your lifestyle was incredible, and you had a drive.
It was incredible, but then, my lifestyle then, I had in those days, £500,000 powerboat. I had a 20,000 square foot house in the UK, right on the cliff tops. Grade 2 listed building, magnificent building, had its own great hall, chapel, this type of stuff. Literally own beach, and we'd stay there for the summers because too up in the Algarve. Our villa in Portugal, to be honest, literally looked like a Colombian drug baron's house because it was just like...
So people would ask, why am I talking about bounce back? You've made so much. What happened?
What happened was the 2008 mega crash. And just to give you an example on just one project we had. So bearing in mind in those days, it was, people that... or the money people would earn is much less than they do now because of the cost of living and stuff. You're looking at 17, 18 years ago. But my staff were all paid well. I had 12 sales staff. They all had company cars, all this kind of thing, and they would earn really good money. And I worked out, I woke up one day and I thought, do you know what? I've got to earn 2.3 million quid to earn nothing, because that's how much my expenses were for all the staff and all the costs. And it was, I thought, God, that's luckily there's so much coming in. All of a sudden, that crash came along, which literally...
What happened?
What happened was this. Just to give you one example, we built, or we're on the way of building 72 beautiful luxury apartments in the Algarve. I always keep something like 6 or 12 per unit. The rest were sold from investors I've been dealing with or purchasers for many years who've been buying off plans, selling, buying off plan. And I made a lot of people wealthy. So I made 11 people millionaires starting with 25 grand. So I was really impressed, blah, blah, blah. Then what would happen is these properties were sold. We used to finance them when they were built. They would take out 80% loans we would get that would include all of their furniture, all their legal costs. That was great. Within a period of 6 months, those properties halved in value, and all the lenders would only offer 50%. So basically, we had to just stop that because the other people who were contracted to us had paid their deposits, but they said, let's put this on hold. And those sites have still not even recovered.
But what happened to your life?
Right, what happened to my life was all of the money. So I still keep, my biggest mistake, I suppose, if I was a hard-nosed businessman, is not stopping there and then saying to everybody, you're redundant.
Okay.
So I kept going for like 12 months. I had a big farm in the UK at the time. I'd just basically be selling all of my assets to pay everybody's mortgages and bills and stuff, because I thought, poor people. Or my own family, they all had houses. I was giving them allowances each month. And the pressure was kind of immense. I had a stroke myself in 2004 by doing too much kind of work because so much business came in. I'm obviously fully recovered, still ugly, but fully recovered. And
I was going to say that bit.
Yeah, I know that, but I can't help it. Yeah. But it's sort of, so just one definition, bearing in mind we owned a new resort had come up and we had bought 120 plots. At the time, one of my business partners was the chairman of Centre Parks, very, very wealthy guy, a Disney director, this kind of thing. So we used to do lots of stuff, but the losses were colossal. So
you're
just
up here now.
Well, just those two properties alone were due to yield us a 3.2 million profit. We ended up having a 1.6 million loss. So you've got a swing there of 5 million quid. So literally, I won't say the figure, but tens of millions.
When I met you, you told me the story of literally going from a chauffeur-driven car to...
Well, what happened was this.
Tell us about that, because I need to get to that bounce back and how you came back from
Well, what
that.
happened was literally everything went, and I did fall out with most of my family because I was at a family barbecue when I'd virtually lost everything. And I heard some of them, and I said, look, I just can't afford to give you your monthly allowances each month. I was paying some of them a couple of grand a month, and I had done for years. And I said, I just can't afford, you have to look after yourselves. They all had jobs by now and done other things. And I heard a couple of them say, I didn't think Mark was like that, lend us down. And I'll be honest, I lost my rag with them. I said, I'm not being funny, you greedy. Obviously, we're on camera, so I won't swear. And I said, for years, I've bought you your houses. I've paid for everything, paid for your weddings, done this, done that, the other. And now when I need a bit of support and I've got absolutely nothing, because I had personal guarantees on stuff, you millions in land. This is sort of quite big business, tens of millions. And so I just kind of thought, well, that's all you're after is greediness. And when you get to that position of not having that, let's go out on our, fantastic power boats and all this stuff and all this kind of champagne Charlie ideas, you see who your real friends are. And
when you're at the lowest there.
Yeah, and we had to have some holiday and went to this really cheap golf resort in Devon. And I thought, well, let's see if I can get back into financial services. And I must have phoned 8 or 9 different networks, including St James's and all these other sort of places. And it was almost as though, we'll get somebody to come back to you. You're some sort of small fry, we're big I ams. And your sister answered it. So Sarah answered the phone. And what a chipper, smiley, friendly person that was. And you came down literally within 3 days, lashing down with rain, all the way to Devon on your motorbike.
I was desperate.
And we, well, I did think that, but no. And you had one no, you didn't have 1 hour. So you came down, and we literally just hit it like that. And we must have spent 5 hours.
We did
in that meeting, and you gave me a chance. And then, funnily enough, about a month after that, all these others started phoning back, offering golden handshakes and all this sort of nonsense. And I thought, it's not for me. I've been up to meet Dan and all the rest of the people, and it was just amazing. And So then that gave me a springboard to have a bit of a kind of credibility again. I'd literally lost everything. And one of my best mates who I'd known since school, he had a big technical engineering company all around the world. So he gave me a job as a sales engineer, paid me double the money he should have had, company car, all this kind of stuff. And I never knew anything. Okay. And he said, right, you can take over the European market. So I was working in Germany, but I was working in Germany. I then always wanted to be a special constable, and they'd had a lot of riots at the time. So I joined the police force as a volunteer. And I also then worked in the clean rooms for this same company. So I drive back from Munich on a Friday, 10-hour drive, and I work a night shift and literally in the clean room. And I remember one day, about 4 a.m, he made me like a supervisor, all these people preparing these little tubings and nuts and bolts and things you put together for this stuff. I had all they used to call it a monkey suit, so you have like a hat on and stuff, all clean room sort of. I looked at myself in a mirror and I thought, what the hell is going on here? 6 months ago, I had a 20,000 square foot house, chauffeured Bentley, share of a plane, all this sort of stuff. I thought, now I'm putting together nuts and bolts on £8 an hour to make ends meet. And my wife got a nice job, first job with Taylor Wimpey. She ended up running Taylor Wimpey for Oxfordshire, 14
So now the bounce back
sites.
begins.
And it just started. So I took their profit from, they made 47,000 the year before with a bloke who had like 3 degrees in engineering and all that stuff, and I knew nothing, to over £500,000. And I got 20% of that as a bonus.
That was a bounce back.
That was a bounce back. The other thing was, although I lost everything, I made a lot of people wealthy. And they said to me, look, you've looked after us. You've not lost your brain, or you're clever, or you're spotting an opportunity. We'll back you. So half a dozen of them got together, put money. I found some deals, split some houses up, made profit. And that's how it all started. But with the backup of you kindly giving me authorization, I then became a mortgage broker, basically, for an estate agent who was quite good. And I probably talked for so long now, so do we have to stop or what? No, sorry.
No, carry on.
No, I think 3 people just fallen asleep in the corner there. So anyway, and that's kind of where it started. And then from then, I started to build again our own properties, obviously with my wife's expertise of running Taylor Wimpey as well. She's fantastic. She's retired now. And it kind of started from there. So it's not been easy. It's been working my guts out, but developing, moving, growing, spotting opportunities, which I've always been good at. I've always liked property. You can see where there's a deal. But in the main, looking after people, and every partnership, this is where people make a mistake. Both partners has got to be, an equal situation, or everybody gains. Because when people start to do taking the mick, or you're relying, or you're paying for everything, and I feel personally, this happens to you sometimes. People take advantage of you, and I know it's been happening to me my whole life. You've got to think, well, that partnership won't work. So everything has to be fair and equal.
So if you were to teach someone about the things you've learned, the 3 things, I would say, the most important things for you, from this being at your highest to being at your lowest overnight, and then bouncing back and developing yourself to where you are now.
Yeah.
I'm glad that New Leaf is a part of that in some small way. What would you say the 3 most important things are?
One of the most important things for me is to be honest. Because if you're honest, even if you've cocked up, it finishes there. So, for example, if I knocked something off there and smashed a glass, a lot of people would say, oh, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But if you say, yeah, that was me, where's it going to go?
So honesty and integrity, what would be the second
Really
one?
important. The second one is, well, I suppose honesty and integrity, being focused, seeing opportunities, and let's face it, we're in a sales business, being a closer and doing things quickly.
Asking for the order.
Yeah, that's probably a weakness of mine, not asking for the order, but not finishing. So I'm a great hunter, as they call it, but there'll be 50 deer queued up because I'm not a very good finisher. So you need important backup staff, which I had with my wife.
And what would be the most important thing you could tell someone who's in the worst position in their life right now, who's at the lowest ebb? What would you say to them?
You can get through it by honesty, hard work, and being sensible. And just when you're in a position to have some money, tuck things away, build up for the future, and trust basically in your advisor.
So a bit of consolidation along the way.
Which
really
is one thing I
helps.
wasn't great at the time, but helps now.
Okay, fantastic. And I think I've got a last question for you. This is the New Leaf podcast. It's all about turning over a new leaf. And what would be the one new leaf that you would like to turn over for the future?
My new leaf, which I've implemented actually, believe it or not, this year, and something you've always been onto, is consolidation, not going all in. I've always been in the past all in terms of millions and millions, either into the ground or into investment that can almost go like that. Consolidate, ring fence, and have that backup, that if everything goes wrong, you've got that backup, you've got the security, and you haven't got the worry.
So grow, consolidate, grow.
Which is probably a great motto for New Leaf.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today, Mark.
That's okay. Thank you very much.